Yeah, no, that and we knew at that point, and to be honest, it felt too good to be true. Unfortunately, that's the way it turned out. But the Undertaker he's the Undertaker. I don't even know where to begin. My first ever WWE appearance was a dark match in Louisville when I was Mark Magnus in OVW, and I worked with him briefly. I ran in and he gave me, I think, the choke slam in the last ride. But to work with him on SmackDown, which I to be honest, I was against moving to SmackDown. I mean, there's a difference between network and cable television. I didn't think we'd have that kind of leeway and freedom of expression on cable as we would with network, but. I was thrilled to be able to work with the Undertaker. I mean, I put him right up there with Hulk Hogan, and he was amazing to work with. I worked a lot of house shows with him, a lot of dark matches. It wasn't just that one match in Buffalo, and at the time, the way it was going, I did realize that my character was fortunate enough to be in a position where they looked at me like I could carry the company and carry SmackDown, and I do believe I was set up for a title run against Batista, but shit happens.
Yeah, obviously a lot of shit happened that summer, and it ended up, obviously it wasn't just with your push and what they were doing with your character, but obviously it was worldwide implications that were going on. But one thing that you just hit on that ultimately kind of led to what the end of the character was the fact that you went from that raw live environment to the taped SmackDown environment, which that 2 days that show was in the can ended up being a pretty goddamn big 2 days in your career. So obviously, if you could have had your druthers and stayed on Raw, obviously you probably would have stayed on Raw.
Yeah, and a little bit was in when it was explained to me, and I remember Stephanie telling me this is a big opportunity, this is a big push. We believe in the character, and of course I appreciated that. Again, in my arrogance and in my youth, I was a little bit more upset that I was leaving my friends on Raw, um, because at that time I had a lot. It's pretty well documented the trouble I had in the locker room coming up. But at that time, that was behind me, and I finally had a place, and I had friends, and I had a niche, and I felt comfortable. And so to uproot me and put me to SmackDown, I remember I remember when I found out. I don't know if it was the next day. I don't know when it was. I just know that wherever I was, I spent the entire day in my hotel room with the shades drawn and the lights off. I was pretty upset about the move, but um, coming in, that locker room was much more difficult. And looking back on it in hindsight, obviously, if I would have stayed on Raw, that never would have happened because I never would have feuded with the Undertaker, and we never would have done the program that we did, and we never would have had the people run in. But hindsight's 2020. There's just a little bit more we could have gotten away with on Spike than UPN at the time. So what are you going to do? I mean, again, that's how the cards fell, and that's the way it worked out. And I have no regrets, and I don't look back and wish anything happened any way other than in how it happened.
Yeah, UPN really pressured WWE to kind of get you off TV after that whole angle with the London bombings controversy with the Max Men and Davari and the Martyr and all that stuff. In a weird way, and I could correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe, but it's kind of my opinion though. I kind of thought that was maybe too soon or whatever. It was kind of cool in a weird way because it was like, wow, they're really going there. Like that, that's deep. They're really doing this. Did that ever strike you like, wow, this is kind of intense, or were you thinking, uh-oh, we're in trouble now?
No, you know what? At the time, but it's funny I say at the time because that was Tuesday, and then by Thursday, that shit became very real. Um, at the time, I thought it was pretty epic. I mean, I thought that they were taking this angle, and they were taking the angle with the Undertaker, and they were taking the character Muhammad Hassan, and they were taking him from a mid-level kind of heat because of the hypocrisy that Hassan pointed out in our general American crowds and demographic. And they were escalating it, and I was all for it. I mean, I thought that was actually, yeah, I thought that was like, wow, that is intense. Okay, let's do it. Not to mention it's with the Undertaker, of all wrestlers. But you know what? It's funny how things change in 2 days because by Thursday, that was not a good idea.
So crazy, and I don't know, in a weird way, I still kind of like, wow, I like that they did that. 'Cause it's so intense. It really kind of makes you hate that character even more, and it really makes you think like, man, that's like a pretty, it's just pretty like cool in a weird way, like how dark it is, and
Hmm.
obviously it leads to Great American Bash against the Undertaker, and kind of a good match, but a weird way to kind of end it, and almost getting quote unquote killed off, and which is weird in the wrestling business, with a character would actually get physically killed, as you get powerbombed through the ramp, and there's
Right.
blood and everything. Is that like a strange way to kind of get killed off TV, or what?
Yeah, I mean it's very soap opera-ish. Yeah,
Yep.
definitely. I don't think there's been too many characters killed off. It was definitely a pretty strong signal that Muhammad Hassan was not coming back. That's for damn sure. But yeah, it was a little weird. And at the same time, I knew it was coming at that point. We struggled with it for a little while about what was going to happen with the character, what was going to happen with Sean and I. I had a feeling that there was no coming back for me at that point, and there may have been, in the distant future, but not in the near future. So, yeah, I mean, and again, everything that my character had done in the short amount of time that I was on the show was to epic. I mean, it was big. We went big. We went big quick. We rose quick, and then, not only did we fall quick, but we got killed off. I got killed. So it wasn't a surprise, and I think it was a pretty fitting end to the character. And I think Muhammad Hassan getting killed off, and I'll credit Davari with saying it, is the end of the Attitude Era of WWE, because after that they kind of softened their program.
Really, really did. And if that happened during the Attitude Era, I really think that they would have just kept going with it, and like, oh, UPN, too bad, or whoever, they would have said, too bad, this is a great angle, and it's getting real heat. They would have they kept going with it. You agree with that? That they probably would have just said so what to the critics, and just kind of put their head down and went forward with it.
Did you ask me if I think they would have done that?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, you know what? I don't know. I think the heat that they got from sponsors and from Muslim groups and anti-Muslim groups, I don't know. I mean, they might have had a little bit more power to do that, if we're talking about 5 or 6 years before that. But, the Muhammad Hassan character, it was at the very, very, very end of the Attitude Era. And I think at that point, they didn't have a leg to stand on as far as keeping the character around. They couldn't justify the character. And at that point, people were so outraged as well as what had been happening in the world to have Muhammad Hassan in the ring and speaking about these things, it was almost in poor taste.
Gotcha. It would have been interesting to see if they really would have went forward with it, but obviously in that day and age, they ended the character, and you kind of alluded to it. There was a huge rumor going on before that happened that you were going to win the world title over Batista at SummerSlam, and it kind of all seemed to be leading in that direction. Was that ever said to you?
Yeah, the way it was put to me was that's going to be the FU to America beating the Golden Boy in his hometown of the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. So yeah, that was said, and that was the plan. I don't think I would ever beat the Undertaker cleanly. It definitely would have been a screw job, but and Batista as well. But yeah, that was the plan. And again, the funny thing again was at the time I lived in DC, where Batista lived as well. So no, that was said, and that was the direction that we were going.
It's kind of crazy to think that it went from that to killing off the character to being released, and your departure, and then your departure from the business, because then you would retire. You never really entered the independent wrestling scene at all. It basically went from probably going to win the world title to retired to not entering the scene, and then obviously with what you're doing today. Was that shocking at all to you? Was that almost like a shock to the system that not only should I or could I have won the title maybe in a different day or a different age, but I'm going to retire from the business entirely?
Yeah, I don't know if that was ever my plan. I mean, obviously, I would have loved to have won the title to be able to have my name in the history books among the greats of the WWE who won that title. But when someone had put it not too long ago that I had my heart broken by wrestling, and I disagreed at the time. But the more I've reflected on it, the more I think that that was pretty accurate. I think that I did. I think that I was so jaded and disenchanted with the business that I just didn't want to do it anymore. I wasn't having fun. I mean, obviously, when we were going through the controversy with what happened after that Smackdown with the Undertaker, it wasn't fun. It was pretty disruptive as far as the anxiety that it produced of whether or not I was going to have a job the next day. So I think when I decided I was done with wrestling, I needed to break away and be done with wrestling. And it really wasn't until years later before I even did my first autograph signing or appearance. And it really isn't until now that I feel like I'm okay with doing some more of them, but because I kind of needed that time to get the rest of my life and my new life back on track. But it was pretty jarring. It happened quick. That's all I can say is it just you go from being on top of the world 1 minute to not being welcome on SmackDown or Raw, and like you said, being released the next.